Here's a scenario that plays out in gardens everywhere. A customer buys a beautiful flowering shrub. It blooms gorgeously the first year. Then they prune it in fall or early spring like they would any other shrub. The next season, no blooms. Sound familiar? In most cases, the problem isn't the plant. It's a common misunderstanding about the difference between pruning and deadheading. Many home gardeners don't understand the distinction, and that lack of knowledge can lead to disappointing results and frustrated customers calling your garden center. So today we'll cover how to prevent those mishaps and help your customers get the best advice for the best performance from their flowering shrubs, using proven winners' color choice hydrangeas as our examples. Let's start with definitions your customers will need to understand. Deadheading means simply removing spent flower heads, leaving the branch structure intact. You can usually trace back to the new bud forming at the leaf node and trim just above it. Pruning means cutting back branches significantly, often by 1/3 to 1/2, to control size, shape, and encourage new growth. This should only be done on shrubs that bloom on new wood, or branches that form from the ground in the same season that the blooms appear. Rejuvenation pruning means cutting the entire shrub down to just a few inches from the ground. This allows the shrubs to put on fresh, vigorous new growth. It's especially useful for shrubs that are overgrown, leggy, or producing fewer flowers or leaves. You might also hear it called renewal pruning or coppicing. Knowing which approach each plant needs depends on when the plant forms its flower buds. Plants that bloom on new wood form their flower buds on the current season's growth. This means you can prune them back by 1/3 or even 1/2 each spring before they break dormancy. The result? A more floriferous plant with a more rounded, fuller shape. Let's take a look at some new wood bloomers. Smooth hydrangeas are one of the most forgiving hydrangeas when it comes to pruning. They can be sited in a sun to part sun location and bloom in early summer. The Incrediball series of smooth hydrangeas has those big, old-fashioned mop head blooms that people love. These workhorses can be cut back by 1/3 every spring and will reward you with massive, fluffy blooms. Incrediball was the first smooth hydrangea on the market to have extra large blooms held up on strong stems that don't flop after a rain. Soon after, Incrediball Blush was released. It has all the useful features and enormous flowers of Incrediball, but blooms in soft pink tones. And this year, we're releasing Incrediball Stormproof Smooth Hydrangea. It's a bit smaller in stature and bloom size than Incrediball, but even more floriferous. A special bonus is that this hydrangea is also lightly scented and a pollinator magnet with 16 times as many fertile florets per inflorescence. Best of all, it has the strongest, thickest stems you can find. All the better to hold up those gorgeous mophead blooms in any weather. Panicle hydrangeas are also new wood bloomers that respond beautifully to spring pruning. Like smooth hydrangeas, prune by 1/3 each spring while shrubs are still dormant. Here are some examples. Limelight Prime is an improved limelight panicle hydrangea with stronger stems and a deeper green color that ages to a richer pink. This update to an old classic also blooms a bit sooner than Limelight, so gardeners can enjoy the flower show longer. Little Lime Punch is more compact at 3 to 5 feet with lime green blooms that turn a vibrant punch pink. Perfect for smaller spaces when pruned on schedule. And if you have customers who love the idea of a panicle hydrangea, but they don't have the space for even a compact variety, recommend these dwarf versions. Firelight Tidbit Hydrangea is a super compact option at just 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. By midsummer, it's smothered in cream to pink blooms from top to bottom. Spring pruning maintains its tidy habit and encourages numerous blooms. And our smallest panicle hydrangea, Tiny Quickfire, is just 1.5 to 3 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide. you know that because it has quick fire in the name, it will start blooming in early summer, about a month earlier than other panicle hydrangeas. Annual pruning keeps it dense and floriferous. Now let's move on to hydrangeas that form next year's flower buds shortly after this year's blooms fade. These are the shrubs that set their buds on old wood, or this year's branches, as opposed to the fresh branches it will put on next year. Pruning them in any way will remove buds, meaning you'll lose next season's flowers. For these plants, deadheading is your only safe option. Let's take a look at some old wood shrubs. Oak leaf hydrangeas are the earliest to bloom and set their buds exclusively on old wood. This means only deadhead after flowering. Never prune unless you want to shape your shrub, and don't mind sacrificing flowers to do so. Oak leaf hydrangeas are native to the southeastern United States. This makes them naturally suited to thrive in those areas, even in the heat where they can lounge happily in dappled shade. It's important to review the size of oak leaf hydrangeas with your customers. Conventional oak leaf hydrangeas grow quite large, up to 10 to 12 feet, and because you will do little to no pruning on them, you can bet they will reach mature size after just a few seasons. But the Gatsby series of oak leaf hydrangeas are more compact, ranging from 4 to 8 feet tall and wide. The new Gatsby Glow Ball is even smaller, at just 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. It features large white panicles that sit atop a full rounded habit. Deeply lobed oak leaf foliage turns shades of orange and russet brown in fall, an improvement on a feature that makes this species so popular. The Fairy Trail series of Cascade hydrangeas also blooms on old wood. As you grow this plant to maturity, long trailing stems form with flower buds at each leaf node. Unlike typical big leaf hydrangeas, which like to be planted in morning sun and afternoon shade, these early bloomers prefer morning shade and the early season heat of the afternoon sun. Stick to deadheading to ensure reliable blooms year after year, and store in a shed or garage in areas close to the cool end of its hardiness zone. Climbing hydrangeas and false hydrangea vine also bloom on old wood, deadhead only, or simply let them develop their own natural form as years progress. Some plants hedge their bets by blooming on both old wood, last year's growth, and new wood, the current season's growth. These need a bit of a different approach. With these plants, focus on deadheading, removing spent blooms at the end of the growing season or early the next season. Since they also bloom on new wood, they can also be lightly shaped with pruning, but understand that aggressive pruning will sacrifice some of those early old wood blooms. Let's take a look at some re-blooming big leaf hydrangeas that are perfect examples of old and new wood bloomers. Our 2026 Hydrangea of the Year, Let's Dance Lovable, is a compact rebloomer that produces saturated pink or blue flowers depending on the soil pH. Gardeners can deadhead spent blooms while awaiting the second flush for continuous flowering, or simply leave them on and enjoy the color transition as the blooms age and new blooms start to appear. Let's Dance Big Band features large pink or blue blooms throughout the season. Blooms age to a rich burgundy. Treat this hydrangea the same as you would Let's Dance Lovable. Historically, mountain hydrangeas, with their whimsical lace-cap blooms, only bloomed on old wood, but the Tough Stuff series of Hydrangea serrata changed that by producing flowers that bloom on both old and new wood. The newest, Tough Stuff Top Fun mountain hydrangea measures a tidy 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, and is possibly our most prolific rebloomer in the series. Now that we've talked about reblooming hydrangeas, which can be pruned with care, let's talk about a new kind of rebloomer, one that can be pruned a bit more freely. A few years ago, we introduced our first big leaf mountain hydrangea hybrid. These hydrangeas have a special trick up their sleeve. They not only bloom on old and new wood, but they also set their flower buds at the tips and at the base of their old and new wood stems. This means even if they're grazed by wildlife, damaged by frost, or pruned more than normally would be prudent, they still will bloom on the buds that set lower on the branches. Let's Dance Can Do was one of our first hybrid hydrangeas. It has full lace cap blooms that range from pink to purple depending on the soil, and reliably blooms on both old and new wood, even when pruned. Let's Dance Skyview is another hydrangea hybrid that blooms reliably on both old and new wood. In fact, it's so dependable that we're calling it a continuously blooming hydrangea. This hydrangea has full mop head blooms that range from a lovely sky blue to a soft hazy pink. Here's the timing information in a nutshell to share with customers. For new wood bloomers, prune when dormant in late winter or early spring before buds break. This gives the plant time to develop new flowering shoots. For old wood bloomers, deadhead after flowers fade, usually mid to late summer, but this can be done in early spring as well. This preserves next year's blooms, which formed as buds in the current season. For old and new wood bloomers, deadhead spent blooms, and if light shaping is needed, do it right after the first flush of blooms. You can prune to shape, and some spring blooms will be sacrificed, but new wood stems will bring more blooms in the same season. When customers ask about pruning their hydrangeas, ask these qualifying questions. What type of hydrangea do you have? If they don't know, you can help them figure this out by asking the shape and the color of the blooms and what shape the foliage is. When does it typically bloom? Oak leaf hydrangeas bloom first, followed by smooth, big leaf, and mountain hydrangeas, and finally panicle hydrangeas bloom later in the season. Are you looking to reduce or change size or just remove old flowers? When you ask this question, it's important to note that shrubs that bloom on new wood, like say Pinky Winky Panicle hydrangea, which matures to 6 to 9 feet, cannot be made smaller through pruning. When you prune these types of plants, once established, they'll reach their intended size by mid-season. Also, if you never prune these plants, they can, and probably will, grow larger than the size listed on the tag. When it comes to new wood shrubs, the mature size listed on the tag assumes they'll be pruned regularly. We used hydrangeas to illustrate this pruning video, but the same principles can be applied to most any shrub. Spirea, like the Double Play series, blooms on new wood. Pruning them by 1/3 in early spring will improve the overall shape and encourage bloom. Deadheading or lightly shearing after the first bloom will encourage repeat bloom. Bloomerang lilacs are old and new wood bloomers. Lightly shape or deadhead after the first bloom to encourage strong rebloom, and then shape again after all the blooming has completed to ready it for the next season. Forsythia, like the Show Off series, are old wood bloomers. Prune after they finished blooming in spring. Any later pruning will affect flower count. Understanding the difference between old wood and new wood bloomers and pruning and deadheading isn't just plant knowledge, it's customer service. The right advice at the point of sale creates satisfied customers who trust your expertise and come back for more plants. Take the extra minute to explain whether their plant needs pruning or deadheading. Your customers' gardens will thank you, and so will your repeat business.